Hey, everyone, for Rental Roundtable number 93, we had on my friend Anthony Durante. We recorded this live at the ARA Show Media Center in Orlando. First time we've done something like this. It was a great episode. We talked about Anthony's background and story, growing up in the industry, working in rental companies as part of his family business. Talked about starting and selling rental companies. Talked about the lessons going through the M&A process, talked about the ARA show and how that's changed. And he one time worked as on the supplier side and many other times as a rental company, and saw the differences there and how that's the show's changed over time. And talked about the future of rental, how data technology is a big part of that. Talked about his new product line, the Owl, and the success of that so far. So really great episode with my friend Anthony. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 93. Got my friend on Anthony Durante. Anthony, welcome. Podcast.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me on the
I haven't done
show.
these live before, so shake your hand.
Yes.
Is this your first ARA show? Second? How many times?
25th to 26th,
20,
I believe.
25.
Yeah, something
ARA
like that.
shows.
Yeah, out of 34 years.
How many times in Orlando?
Oh, probably about 10 times. I actually worked the show too once. I worked a show for my uncle's hydraulic hose portable repair kit. So not only attendee, but a vendor once.
What's more fun, attendee or exhibitor?
I like the exhibitor. I like, the challenge of seeing how many sales you could drive up in a day. It's a lot of fun on the floor, sure.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about the future stuff you're working on, which is exciting. I'm a technology person, so we're going to have to talk about that. But I always like to start with people's backgrounds. You've had a whole family history of rental, successful exit. You sold a company, 2 years ago, 2024?
Yep.
Catalyst. So tell us how you got into rental. How'd you get started?
So yeah, I've grown up in construction as an iron worker. My dad had a company, and when I was around 17, I kind of liked the concept of the rental company, dealership model. I went to work for my uncle, John Durante at Durante Equipment back in '91, and we were considerable size for a 2-location company. Myself, my cousin John, who has Durante Equipment in Florida, my brother Steve, who's currently at Herc, basically took over the reins of the day-to-day by 1995. And, we ran my uncle's business, and he really didn't have a strong management structure. So we were able to pretty much run through the company wherever we wanted to go. So, one day if I wanted to work parts and then eventually rebuild the parts department, we did that. If I wanted to manage a shop and then rebuild a shop. So we really had, we didn't have so much mentorship per se in each department, but we had the freedom to do what we wanted with change, and very successful at implementing a lot of concepts. And then eventually sold out in 2000 to United Rentals, which is now branch 812.
Awesome. You started in 91.
Yeah.
The year I was born.
No way. Oh.
You feel old?
Nah, young at heart. Yeah.
So started in 91, working for the family business, sold to United. At that time, 2000, that was sort of United's heyday, right? Growing every week, they were buying a company, right?
Yeah, we were right at the end of it. I think we were like branch number 790, right? The frenzy started 97, 98, but we were on the back end of it. And actually, when they bought us, we were merged with the local competitor. And at the time, we were the largest general rental facility in the country, which was really cool. Flagship location. Whenever they brought in Wall Street investors, they were bringing them into our location. So it was a great experience. And all my bosses are the guys that are running it today, from Matt Flannery on down.
So you've met Joe Condrip, of course. He helped sell your company later. Did he buy you guys in 2000? Was he on the team at United?
No, he might have been. I wasn't involved in I wasn't an owner, so I was handling the due diligence, but passing it off to my uncle. I don't remember who was representing them on their side. I wasn't in that room.
Yes. So when you started in 91, do you think in 2026 you'd still be in rental?
Probably.
Yeah. A lot of people don't think that. Like they kind of get in for a year or two, and then they find them 30 years later, and they're in it.
Yeah.
You sort of felt like you'd been in for a while.
I think so. I didn't see myself doing anything else. I like the store concept, and as much as I didn't want to be in construction, it just spoke to me.
Yeah.
And then even then, it just thought that it was there was a lot of opportunity, and also seeing everything take shape. I remember United Rentals, and they came in, they said this is going to be the future, and they laid out their own plan. Yeah. And it was very hard for people that worked in there to even understand what they were going to do. But they did it, and it was a big way. But rentals transformed, so every time it transformed, it's kept me intrigued. Every time it evolved, right?
Stagnant.
Yeah, I thought maybe the linear line looked like I worked for my uncle and that's forever, and then okay, maybe I work for my uncle and start my own business. But it's so much more now when you start rolling in ARA and bringing in concepts like the internet, peer executive groups. You start rolling all these different layers, and it's become so much more complex. Even somebody like yourself, right?
Yeah.
The stage that you have, the podcast that you do, really 1991, things were on microfiche and
People are like, what's a podcast?
yeah, exactly. So each step of the way, I've found that each evolution, it's always intrigued me and pulled me along. So I'm glad I'm still here and still relevant.
Well, it's an interesting concept that is constantly changing. If it had been stagnant, you may have gotten bored, done something different.
100%.
What keeps you excited as a future? That you talk about the changes that's been happening, but where do you think this is going? Consolidation?
It's hard, right? Because the consolidation, I feel like who's ever left, the legacy companies that are around, they're not really selling, right? So it's been a bit of a slowdown. So it's interesting. I also think that a lot of people are taking a wait and see approach to what kind of efficiencies can they do with AI. And I think even when you have owners transitioning to kids, I think this is an opportunity where kids are like, I can do something different than what my dad or my mom has done. And, again, I think that's an interesting evolution, and it kind of gives, it's a little bit of a wait and see period, but at the same token, it's good to see everybody's pivoting into all the new technologies that are coming out.
Well, I think the generational changes, that's what even this podcast, the average age we've talked about 34, it's not 74, but it's the people listen to the podcast are going to be more likely to embrace technology and change things. So you sold the company to United in 2000, and then what happened?
So I worked for United for a year and a half through my contract, including through 9/11. We were ground zero. I was handling municipal sales as one of my roles. So when the towers got hit, I'm on the phone and calling all the municipalities. The first call came in for 10,000 body bags. Just crazy days, but it gave me some real good experience, and to understand that had we been a local independent company when that happened, we never would have been able to cover the amount of equipment that was needed for downtown in such a short period of time. It was amazing to have the United Rentals network and just go out and pull in, hundreds of light towers from different states, whatever was needed, John Deere gators and whatnot. So I don't know if I answered your question on that one, but.
So when did you start your company? That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. So when I had left United at the end of my contract, it was 2002. Yeah. January 1. So I started up my first business, which was Gotham Equipment. Very niche operation, very select clientele. I focused more on a lot of parts and service. I have a strong service background. And to me, it was a way to get into, companies was not traditionally through the big sales and through the rentals, but more of how can I do something that other competitors aren't doing. So I also did a lot of used equipment. I specialize in that, global outlets. I started around the same time as Bitadu with selling on eBay. And I really enjoyed that. It was fun, going into people's yards, clearing them out, taking a commission and flipping it. But that kind of ran its course. I guess I'll save you from your next question and just roll in what happened to that company. But in 2009, I got hit. I had too few clients. It actually hurt me at that point because they were impacted by that recession. I was upside down quite a bit. I was hurting. And then my cousin John Durante, whose father we worked for, he had approached me. He was out of the industry for a few years and said, let's do what we've always envisioned. The goal was 100 locations. That was our early goal. When we started that, back in the day, I think Hertz had 102 in the early 90s when we started targeting that number, and Prime Equipment that's now evolved into Sunbelt. Prime Equipment had like 72, so we kind of stuck with that 100 number.
You don't get 103.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We'll settle at 100, but it was kind of like a nostalgia number, and we started up Durante Rentals in the trough of the '09 recession. John had brought in some money at a 12% loan from somebody, and we went out to auction and basically bought $1.2 million in equipment that was 10% used for $500,000. So once we did a 50% time ute on that, we pretty much made our money back in a year. And Durante Rentals never stopped. Like we just kept going all the way up until 2019. When John and my partner Chris Jones had exited, we partnered up with Clairvest, private equity group, and ran that all the way into 2024 until the sale of Herc to Herc.
So you grew up in the 90s, like the 90s with rental, with the internet coming and Bitadu, and you went through 9/11 in New York, and then the 2008 crisis, and then private equity, then eventual sale. What did you learn in particular in 2008, 2009 when the recession hit that you've lived through it, and now you've made a lot of lessons. What would you have learned? What would you have done differently going back to that period of time?
Oh man, where to even begin? I also think that some of the mistakes I made, like not being more onto the internet, some of the issues I had today are common sense. So I don't think that I would.
2008, was the rental industry even there? Do you think you could have been?
Yeah, it was. I didn't focus on it, and I think that was a big change that that John really hammered home in 2009 was leveraging the internet. And you didn't have big rents at the time, and the nationals weren't really focused on the people that were searching on the internet. So I think that there was probably a good 6 or 7 year run where the internet was our best location or our best employees, our best ROI.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until around like 2017 or so, 2018, when big rents really started pumping money into the internet, and then Sunbelt United were like, wait a minute, there's a lot of serious contractors coming through, and then the money started getting pumped in, and then the cost per click started, getting reduced into half. But by that point, we already had our legs under us. So
Why do you think the rental industry is sort of later on technology adoption? Maybe not the case as much now, but that's been the story, the narrative, at least, right? You talk to, our friend Josh Nickel would say that rentals ranked 47 out of 48 industries in technology adoption or something like that.
I think we're still there, right?
Still, you think we're still
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Why? Is it because the rental companies don't want to adapt it, or there's not enough good technology options out there? Like, what's is it too hard?
I don't know. For me, I can't speak to people in the middle of the country. Maybe they're in certain markets where they're the only game in town, and they don't necessarily need that. I just felt with New York, it was to get our space in that environment, especially with United and Sunbelts and massive amounts of rental fleet. I think that just going out, we didn't have the money to have an outside sales rep.
Yeah.
We were an inbound team for the first 10 years. So I think it was just, I don't know. I don't know why the industry is slow to adapt. I feel like we're early adopters of
Do you
technology.
think you were forced to, though, because of your competing with the nationals, or were you using technology? Do you think that direct competition forced you to lean in?
I think so, and I think people are realizing that now, like with solutions, right? Third party plugin apps. I think people now know, like, you have to use a third party apps to really leverage your business. As much as we know, like a lot of people have instinct. A lot of them are second, third generation. It's natural. They've been born into rental. They do rental. But at the end of the day, as much as you think you might know, no matter how good your gut is, technology, good reporting, information at your fingertips is always going to be helpful. Whether or not you rely on it, to glance at it is worth the glance alone.
Do you think the rental companies that use that, or how much of an advantage are they?
I think a lot. I think anybody that's not, utilizing technology, leveraging technology and looking for better solutions, I think is foolish. But at the same token, there's been a lot of technology, and right? It looks good on the demo, and then you do the test on it, and your team rejects it. So at the end of the day, I think it's one thing to teach somebody how to strap a truck, drive a forklift. It's a whole different skill set to really teach a team how to leverage technology and how to implement it, and then to manage them and make sure it's tractionable.
Yeah. We'll talk about technology in a second. I want to hear lastly about the M&A process. Why did you decide to sell? That's a question people ask. When do I sell? Why should I sell?
Yeah, we had a number of revenue, a sale number, a timeline,
You guys
and
get to, was it 8 or 10 locations?
yeah, we were up to 10 locations, 100 plus employees. I don't remember, 50 million plus in fleet.
Managing 100 people. Was that fun, or?
I liked it. To me, as long as you're connected to all your people, it's okay.
Yeah.
And then when we took in Clairvest and it started growing down into Delaware, and you start getting these locations in states that you don't just travel to. We have the advantage in New York that our whole entire footprint was 50 miles north to south and 10 miles east to west.
Okay,
and that would be
there. Yeah.
and that would be the equivalent in, some areas of driving, 100 miles in each direction. But in New York, it's just so congested that, we had that ability. But I always knew the employees. I personally, from growing up under my dad's business, I've always liked to be what I consider like a battlefield general. I joke around that it was 32 years before I had my own office. I usually always took a seat at the front counter, or I like to be in the mix.
Managing by walking around.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
See what's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
What was it like? What did you learn about leadership? 100 people. What went well? What did not go well? Right. I mean, we're talking about what you're doing now. It's very smaller, different thing. 100 people, organization is a different beast.
Yeah, leadership. I mean, my thing is don't be afraid. For me, if you have to be strong in front of your team, like let's say a Christmas party, you're giving a speech, be strong, be that leader. But at the same token, if you really got to,
George Washington when we had dinner at the where he had his famous speech
at Francis Tavern in New York, right?
You still owe me steak.
Exactly. You got it anytime you want. But sometimes I find that you have those tough conversations, and I always enjoyed, when you get in the trench, a lot of blue collar workers, especially in New York. We at one point we had more prison time in the company than industry experience, and those people.
Is that your headline? Is that your?
Pretty much, and that type of personnel that comes in needs to be handled a little bit different. You don't know these people. They didn't grow up necessarily the same way I did, but I always found that when you need to dig into your team, the way you present yourself. I was very big on body language. If I had to slope my shoulders to be a little bit more meek and to get them, I would do that. But I would say as far as leadership, it's not a one-dimensional thing. And anything that I've ever gone into, it's, prepping mentally over and over about how you're going to deliver the message to your team. So that's kind of how I view leadership.
So you're excited to sell. You're going through the process. You guys use Catalyst, I believe.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
What advice would you give someone going through an M&A process? You've been a success story, right? Like 10 locations, sold to Herc, ran the whole process.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was at your Roundtable, and you remember Joe Condrip was on stage, and people had asked him, they said, what's the most important metric? And of course, it's EBITDA,
right.
Top line revenue. One of the examples I brought up was the TRIR, Total Recordable Incident Report.
Yeah.
And that's, for anybody that doesn't know, that's basically for every 100,000 man hours, how many times does somebody go? I think the qualification is to an emergency room. Right? They walk into a medical clinic. I think that's what you get dinged for.
Yeah.
But it's a metric that most companies don't even know, and I wasn't introduced to it until we started bringing in a nationally recognized team. People from Herc and United Rentals. But one thing I realized is it's the same thing with a customer. If you go to a customer's yard and that yard is in shambles, then they're probably going to be ordering equipment last minute. They're probably always going to be late on your payments. They're probably going to be making the wrong orders. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen by that. If you have a bad TRIR, right off the bat, what kind of company they're walking into, because the one metric that flies in the face of growing revenue is safety. Everything else you can technically cut out, but if you cut out safety, you will have a bad TRIR, and the hardest policy to put in place is safety. So if you don't have that, then at what point did you perfect process? But if you have TRIR in place, then it means that all your other processes are technically easy to put in place. And I think that's a big indication. And I was talking to Brandon Horgan at Sunbelt, and I asked him, I said, do you think that is worth the quarter of a turn alone, right? And for anybody doing the math out there, if you're a $20 million business, let's say, and you get an extra quarter of a turn on the multiple, that's hundreds of thousands or $1 million.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. And again, I think that when they walk into your location, if you're a 1.0 or less, which is the goal, and United's on there, all the nationals, there's a bigger difference of how they're going to approach you in a boardroom versus not. And for anybody listening too, with data centers and a lot of these large job sites, they mandate that you keep track of that record. So for smaller rental companies listening, if you want to level up and get on these larger job sites, well, then you need to improve that TRIR because it's going to come. And I would imagine that only becomes more aware as we move into the future.
So safety was an important metric. What was your ratio?
We were around a 10 or a 12 at Durante, which is horrendous. But what's weird is we never really had a bad incident. It was like maybe somebody got their finger cut. Maybe one time somebody got something that nothing detrimental. So like we never really had a moment where I had to go home and go to sleep and wonder, how did I hurt this employee? We never had that. And the first thing that we learned was you put in a nurse's hotline.
Yeah.
And, as soon as an employee gets hurt, they call the nurse's hotline. And half the times they would tell the employee, put ice on your finger or do whatever. And right off the bat, like in a short period of time, that dropped in half. And then we put in the, safety goggles, right? Steel-toed boots, safety vests in the yard. And another one that, I don't really see people grasp, but if you go to a national rental company, you'll notice that all the pickup trucks are backed in. You're much more aware when you're pulling into a parking spot. You back in when when you're aware. When you first get into a vehicle and you're putting your coffee down and, putting your keys and checking your phone and setting your GPS, you're not aware of the surroundings that you just walked out of into your vehicle,
Right.
and now you have to back out. And if you have like vans next to you and other pickup trucks, you don't really have visibility other than your camera. So something as stupid as that is a major, is a major change. And to me, it's a blaring thing that I see every time I go into rental companies now. And, again, as far as if a contractor is going into your facility and sees that you're not doing that, right off the bat, the contractor knows that you're not safe. And that can trickle down the line. Are you changing the lights, that break? Do you have all the safety chains in process? At somewhere, if your trucks aren't backed up, it's symbolic that somewhere you are not, somewhere you're cutting corners and you don't know when that's going to come and bite you. But if you have everything in place, from the goggles to the boots to the truck's backed up, a low TRIR, then that's a safe company.
Interesting. Well, my dad worked at Cintas for a while, and every time he borrows my car, he backs it in. And my wife knows he was here because he backs it in. She doesn't understand it.
There you go. And even with him, I'm sure he did that. If you say, Dad, why did you do that? A, it was probably just made sense.
Yeah.
But the second thing is he probably said, when I go and visit these contractors that are, that are safety conscious, if every single one of them is backed in and you roll up and you pull in head nose, nose in, obviously it's a blaring, you're not on the same program that they are. And as an equipment rental company, we should be at the forefront of safety. We should not be following what our customers mandate. We should be setting the tone on our own on how to, conduct business safely.
I mean, these little things matter. At our event, Rental Roundtable Live, Brett Baker, you remember him?
Yep.
He's talking about he paints all of his stuff, like all the time, constantly, and he services really well. Those small things matter.
Yeah,
they do. Perception's reality. I think Malcolm Gladwell. This may not be a true story, but it feels like a true story. In like the 70s in New York, subway was all sort of ratchet, and they got new ones. And they painted it, they cleaned it up, and then they started enforcing everything. And apparently, crime went down. You can tell me if that happened or not. But
well, I mean, to even that point, right? Subways used to be graffiti, right? How about this? Everybody knows the equipment. If you send out, I can't say the way I usually say it, but if you send out bad-looking equipment, you're going to get back worse-looking equipment. If you send out everything in order, not only do you capture the rental damage easier upon return, but when you send out respectable equipment, your customers respect it even more.
Yeah. So sold the company, and you were going to go buy an island at the beach and retire, and didn't do that. Did you get back to work?
What year are we talking about? Which? Yeah, I didn't know. Nah, I'm too young. I'm too young to retire. I've always been a workaholic. I enjoy what I do too much, right? If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. So to me, I've always done data. I've always done dashboarding. My cousin John asked me one time, he says, when you close an account, he says, what do you celebrate? And I said, technically, I celebrate a dot on the map. I celebrate a graph going up. Like for me, I'm a statistical person. I've always
map with your dots of
100%. I have something called Buzz Map that it's not out in the market yet, but it's completely unlike anything that's out there. If I can bring it to from concept to actual, it'd be great. But to me, I've always enjoyed the game of watching the graphs go up. Yeah, the gamification of it. And I think, for me with data, my mom said, don't go into baseball stats. There's no money in it. And then, look what happened. So I kind of missed out.
Billy Beane.
Yeah, or Bill James is my mentor, and he mentored Theo Epstein, who was hired at 28 years old when I was 28. And I called my mom and I'm like, what did you tell me, But I realized that there's an underserved market in our industry that we can bring that gamification in. And especially with all the young kids that are coming in, right? I know a lot of them, when they look at certain dashboards, the winners are going to say, yeah, I already knew that. The losers are going to say, well, that doesn't reflect accurate. And the people in the middle are going to say, I don't understand it. But in reality, we're all playing these complex computer games and online, and none of them in 5 minutes grab you. I mean, you have to sit down and work at it. So the one thing I think that the industry has to break is looking at technology and in 5 minutes saying that it doesn't work and then walking away from it does not serve you well, because when you pay $80 for a game, you make sure that you watch the videos and play that game long enough. I mean, World of Warcraft and all these other ones have millions of... No, I'm more of like a Sim City, Railroad Tycoon, Civilization. But even those games, I mean, Civilization, I picked up a few times way back before I actually sat down and said, I'm going to learn this. And I think that if you can make our, data and technology and reporting look more like those games, and now with AI, we can help feed them along and train, you have little pops up, little automatic bots that can help them through the maze. But, in my opinion, I think that the industry is ripe for gamification that'll drive this newer, this newer generation in, right? Like everything is rewards and goals and, and high fives. So, build that into the reporting that we have.
So you were sort of late to technology, it sounds like, as a rental business, and realized competing with the nationals that you needed it. So you started embracing it, and you started building your own report. So I want to hear. So you sold the company in 2024, take some time off. Now you're building the Owl. Tell us about the Owl. What is it? Why did you do it?
Yeah, the Owl was a vision I had 2 years ago, coming off the rental show. I actually was. It's something I just downloaded. I don't know how your journey is with Quipli, right? We all have our own journeys. But one day I woke up and it just like beamed in, and I had this vision and everything, and I realized that I'm going to start a company. I'll make a short story, but one of the things I realized is I was in the room with the year that I worked the show, 94, 95. I was in the room with somebody named Ethan Zubek, whose father had several locations in Jersey. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I found out that Ethan, who was leaving me to work the booth by myself that year, because he was running around to basically get manufacturers on a platform on the internet. And I was like, what is the internet? Well, that became Smart Equip. So Smart Equip technically was born in my hotel room back in 94, 95. And I could have been there, and I was mad that he wasn't helping me while I sold my 41 portable hydraulic hose repair kits. Meanwhile, this guy's, setting the base for something big. And I said, you know what? If you have the vision and the dream, then, and like you said, right? You went to Home Depot and you says, hey, I don't like the experience of how tickets are being written. And all of a sudden you come out with this plan. And when you look around and realize that nobody else is quite doing that, you have a niche. And I think for the Owl, it was, first the name came in, and, it was just this, how do I bring this to be on a, very speakeasy, quiet. I didn't want to be too loud. I didn't want anybody to see what we're doing. What we do is completely different than what's out there, but I didn't want anybody to see it and replicate it. If any software company that's got, 100 or more, whatever employees, anybody really, I mean, we were a small software company on the block, but if anybody else sees it, they could replicate it. So for the past year and a half, we've technically been developing this behind the curtain. And in a year and a half, there's probably only been about 75 people in the industry that have actually seen our product. And we've had, 6 betas, I would think 6 betas or so. And it's a $1 million company, a 3, a 5, a 10, a 20, and $100 million a year company to kind of monitor each one and understand the challenges of how to bring a dashboard to action for $1 million company, right, versus a $100 million company. And to me, the goal is to try to make one board that's agnostic to both, that you can just hit a button, and it pivots to the size of and the needs that it needs to reflect.
So 6 people in beta, you now been acquired today by a rental software.
We'll say rental software,
the green one.
Yep.
So now it's more public what the Owl does. Can you explain what does the Owl do and how does it benefit a rental company?
Sure. I think the difference with what I do to possibly what's out there, I obviously don't know what everybody's doing, and the game is changing so rapidly.
We built the Falcons.
Touche. But I think, for us, I don't think that the dashboarding ever really got anywhere in our industry. And I know, some people obviously are building their own custom, but as far as, what's available on the market, like, I think everybody would say Rouse is probably like the best thing that's out there. And I think Rouse is awesome, and the data and the insights it gives you, but it doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't tell you where to look. It doesn't prioritize. So for me, it's building a dashboard. And now with the technology of AI, I believe that our system, as opposed to just putting the black box of AI onto it, which I think everybody knows, Jeff White mentioned today on the town hall, he called it hallucination, AI hallucination. AI will give you a confident answer, and you go like, is that right? And it's like, oh, you're right, I'm wrong, and if you tell it it's wrong, it'll agree with you. And I think that black box is kind of what people might be looking to do. And it's okay, it's 80%, but I think that you can drill down much better if you have a reporting to act as a scaffold system that the AI knows how to prioritize and pick off of. And, for me, I'm a data scrubber, I'm a visualizer, and then I can also proof check it from being, a worker back in the day to a manager and to an owner. So I'm kind of all 3 of the pillars I believe that are needed to roll out a product, because you have an end user that says something, and then you tell your programmers that, and the programmer doesn't understand the end user, and the end user doesn't know how to.
The end user doesn't understand what they actually want. That's the scariest part.
They don't know what they
Say we want
want,
this
and
button, they really want to solve a different problem.
yeah,
Right? That's
and
the
I think all those pieces of the pipe don't understand how to, you tell somebody like, hey, give me this graph, and it comes back like a day later, and it's not exactly what you wanted. And then you ask the operator, like, is that what you wanted? Like, I guess so. For me, it's bringing all the pieces together under one, one concept. So I check all of that. I write the logic, the equations, design the dashboard, and then self-test it myself, and then build counter tools to check my tools. So I'd like to think that it's, kind of I say me, but I do have a partner, John Feliciano. But I like to think that we're a very small, intimate shop that's able to pivot quickly, self-check, self-audit. I don't have to go to an end user necessarily because I have my own concepts, my own experience in the past. But I think that's kind of how we're different than everybody else.
You heard of the mythical man month in software development? The idea that you add more engineers, you actually get slower. Like you double your engineering team, you cut productivity by in half. Team of two, see down over here. Mighty and lean.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like to me, if AI gets 80%, it's probably better than most of what's out there. But to me, what's the next step beyond that? Like if that's level one of a report, and then we have the enough information and data coming through to start going deeper, right? Double clicking down. Now it's 80% on top of 80%, right? And that's not 160, and that's not 80. That's 64, right? If the math is mathing, I've heard that twice today. So, yeah, if the math is mathing. But for me, that's why I like what I do, because it's, if I say to somebody, here's your top 100 clients, and here's your top, items that you need to buy, and here's your exact items that you need to repair first. If they're agreeable with that, then they never really have to check our equation, where I think the AI kind of cloaks in a mystery. And if you question it and it says, oh, you're right, there's, what's the logic that you can open up the curtain on and kind of see how it's operating? So, the future, I believe, for us is we have the scaffold system built, but now we're going to wrap it in the AI, where I think most other software companies are putting the AI out there and then learning, from companies. But I mentioned this to you in the past when we were talking, but to me, 99% of the people might not budget or know what their time use is on a given day, or what the time you should be on a day. So at the end of the day, as much as machine learning is good, it's the general population is teaching a model, as opposed to somebody that's going to show them how they should go. And, something that stuck me with leadership was, they say a good leader takes people where they want to go, and a great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go. So I think that AI could be a really good tool, but in my opinion, to move people forward and to teach them or show them the paths and the actions to take against their will, but it's undeniably a conceptual, it's a conceptual guarantee. Like there's no denying that this data is the right way. And if the system is showing you a certain way, I think that, that's a great product, because it's going to take you where you don't necessarily want to go.
Do you think AI in equipment rental in March, it's March now, 2026, is it overhyped or underhyped?
I think, and you're on to that you can speed up the desk. You can definitely take shortcuts. And I think that that's, awesome, right? Yeah. Taking that 2 or 3 or 5 minute process and turning it into, 30 seconds, and dispatch is automatically texted, and the customer, I think that's phenomenal. And the industry, if we stopped right there, I think the industry would be much better off. And look, at the end of the day, people don't need data. I mean, we are growing as an industry by leaps and bounds. Everybody's doing great, massive success on a lot of companies. But at the end of the day, I think that if people have the right tool and they understand how to use it, I think sky's the limit.
Well, I think you have to know something. Obviously, we're both now rental tech founders here.
Yeah.
I would say I think it's underhyped, big time. I think for all the noise about AI, which everything is AI now, it's hard to cut through the noise of what it actually are, these LLMs that are driving value. I think I had a CEO of Big Rest was on 2 weeks ago, and he said that 90% of these AI projects are failing. But I think it's not because the technology is bad, it's the stuff you're talking about. They're scoping the problem wrong. They don't understand what the technology is doing. They don't understand what they're solving for. Trying to roll a project out to claim AI victory to the board.
Yep.
But when you're scoping it right, I think it is, we are the first inning of the internet again.
Yep.
And in my view, like you've heard me talk about this, I think we're in the third evolution of rental tech. The first one was pen and paper. So now I got my digital pen and paper. And that ended in 1980 with the system of record software, equipment rental software, right? And I think that has gone through this year. And I think what we're now in the third evolution, which is what I'm calling the system of action, software that does work for you. It's AI, agents.
Yep.
And I think And I think it's as impactful as going from pen and paper to computers. Like, could you imagine running your business 2024 on pen and paper?
No.
Right? And I think where we're going in the next 5 years, the AI is going to feel like that, going from old school to AI. So, what do you think about these agents? Do you really think that rental companies can have agents, workers doing work, answering phone calls, routing dispatch, logging missed rentals automatically, running reports automatically? Do you think that's where the future goes, or do you think people aren't going to be ready for it?
I know that anytime I've ever tried to predict the future, I've been wrong.
Predicted the future in '94 with Smart Book guys.
Yeah, totally, right. I don't think I'm necessarily an AI expert. I think I'm as informed as anybody else who wants to be informed. But again, and I know that that's your front, and I love the way you're phrasing it. You could tell, I could feel that you're on that, and I'll defer to you on that as the expert.
I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. But for me, it's like I'll always go back to my own logic, and no matter what, no matter how much gloss, no matter how much that does, I think there's always going to be relevancy for solid logic. And maybe the AI at some point comes up with its own logic, but right now,
They have to be trained.
they have to be trained. There has to be a math.
I was talking the other day. I was going on a run. I was like, "Here's my time," and I was like, "Do you think I can qualify for this race?" And it was like, "Based on your time, yes. Wait, let me check it. No. Wait, let me check it again." Yeah,
Right.
it was like arguing with itself. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
AI.
I took some of the concepts we did and I put it into 8 different models, and I was asking it to back engineer. Now, I am extremely respectful to AI. I don't know when the machines take over, so I am a please and thank you person to the.
So it'll be nice to you.
Yeah, I'm totally nice, but it was.
You ever watch Nate Bargatze?
No.
The comedian. I watched one of his shows, and he was in a big Atlanta Hawks NBA arena, and he was like, "AI is the best thing I've ever seen. It is so smart." He's like, "But if we go camping and say something,"
Yeah, right. My thing was when I tried to back engineer because I wanted to know, can somebody screenshot what I've done and throw it in, and if the model can replicate it on its own, then I have a problem. Like I'm obsolete, right? Automatically, as soon as I put a dashboard out, it's now obsolete.
Yeah.
And AI wasn't getting there. And one time I put it in and it was thinking and thinking. I'm watching TV and I keep going back to it. And hey, how's it going? Oh, 2 more minutes. And it was 15 minutes and then 30 minutes and then 60 minutes. And finally, after about an hour and 15, hour and a half, I was asking, and AI said, another 5 minutes, I'll have this figured out. I started popping off. I'm like, you don't even know. You can't back engineer it. I thought you knew what you were doing. So I definitely taunted AI when it couldn't crack the code.
I don't know if you've heard of model welfare.
No.
Model, LLM model. What they're saying now is if you start to abuse, if you start to be mean to it, they want to have the AI have rights to shut you off. So if you're too mean and abusive to the AI, it will turn off and say, "You can't talk to me like that."
I love AI. It's very smart. Yeah.
Love you.
Yeah.
Bow down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that I have another software friend in a different space. He's using AI to write software now, and he has these agents, and he programs them. He's one of them. He's like, "I want you to be the young, innovative, smart software engineer." The other one, "I want you to be the grumpy old, but traditional software engineer." And he has them debating. Now he's hooked up a microphone and he talks to them, and they're arguing with each other. Like, "I think you should write the code this way. You should do it this way." And he's like, I'm like, "You sound really weird. I don't know if this is working or not, but that's the edge." And I think that there's a famous article went around 3 weeks ago that it's talked about we're in February 2020. Do you remember when everyone COVID was out there, no one knew it?
Yep.
And there's some people think that's where we are with AI. It's I think it's way advanced from where we are, but we don't really know yet. And I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I think AI also is kind of like having 100 of your friends, if you have that many, right? 100 friends, and if somebody asks you a question, you could defer. You could phone a friend to any one of them, right? So AI is like the best of each of that your friend has to offer. And I think maybe the way that AI advances down the road is it's going to take not one person or one movement, but a bunch of people, right? You're definitely forcing software companies to look at their AI component in their software system. We have, let's say, somebody like an Achille Torre who always speaks, and he's an AI guy. You have an Elliot who's an outside guy. To me, each person is probably going to be relevant with that final product of AI before AI is able to just take it on their own. So for me, I've recognized that I don't believe that there's anybody really focused on data. So for me, I want to be the data guy. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I consider us, and one of my things is I believe that, one of the concepts I want to do is a data revolution. Like, no longer are we going to allow our software companies to not have good reporting. We've been asking for better reporting, right? To do a year to date or a last year, and the difference between them is painful for most systems. They lock up for 5 minutes. You get an Excel output. You have to know index match or summit formulas. So in my opinion, I believe we've got the data revolution launching. And I think that every one of us is racing up to a pyramid. Like when you ask me, like, what do I think about AI? That's not necessarily expertise, because I already know I'm not going to predict it correct. So I'm going to stay in the box that I'm going to do and keep an eye on people like yourself that's probably going to know more on AI. Look at Josh Nickel. I don't have to learn about who's the up and coming people like yourself, because 5 years ago, Josh brings these people out of the woodwork to you.
Whoever Josh is talking to today will be
right. So I don't have to technically mine for the latest in technology, because Josh is already doing that. So I think it's all of us have a hand into bringing the industry forward. So I'm not going to focus on somebody else's box as much as I'm going to stay in my lane and make my lane as best as possible. And when people need, what I'm doing, then here I am. Because for me to claim to be an expert in something that I don't know where it's going to be in a year. I mean, in the last, right, we went from 6 fingers to 5 in the past, so many months,
The Will Smith spaghetti.
Yeah, well, exactly. Will Smith spaghetti.
I think it's right to stay in your lane and niches to riches strategy. Elliot's got that brand. Phil's got that brand. You've got that brand. The data guy, equipment rental.
Yeah.
We're at the ARA show, so what are you excited about for the week? Officially kicks off tomorrow. What are you excited about the show this week?
I mean, clearly I like that there was a news announcement, fulfilling a dream of becoming a data person. I love the fact that, I believe I succeeded, with having one of the largest, fastest rental companies in the country for 10 years, that, I've proven, in my own opinion, right, because I got to, always beat the day before. But, what we did with the equipment rental, we won that game. And now I love that I'm able to put on my hat and go into a totally different area. My programmer, I try to talk to him sometimes and he just doesn't get it. And I'm like using like baby language to him. And he's like, oh, that's, this concept. And I'm like, you really must hate dealing with me because your friends all speak the same language. And he's like, you're like an anomaly. He's like, I like it because it's so raw. It's untrained. I've never really gone to school for this or anything else. So for me, I like.
No one's gone to school for AI. That's the thing.
Yeah, AI definitely. But to me, I love the fact that I wanted to do baseball stats, and now here I am doing it for the industry. Yeah, I love that.
This is why you're bringing people full circle.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
We're almost out of time here. Getting the signal. Final question I asked everyone: best career advice you've gotten that shaped your success.
Best career advice
you've gotten to help shape your success. What you've been doing, what you're doing today.
Oof. Stacey Irons used one today, and it's what we use at Durante, but be comfortable being uncomfortable. I like to try to get something different, but that's a mantra that we live by. I got to thank Jason Irwin on that one. Best career advice.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And we talk about with leaders, like not taking people not where they want to go, but they need to go, right? It's even for yourself, taking yourself where you need to go. Part of that, right?
Yeah, I think, I never try to believe my own BS too much. Don't ever think you're the smartest person in the room or the biggest person in the room. I know when we had Durante Rentals, every time we came to the show, I was telling my partner as we went down the escalators, we would always say, just remember, there's somebody bigger than us and there's somebody smarter than us, and they're probably not even opening their mouth. So for me, it's, know what you're good at and be good at it, and know what you're not good at it and emulate or, take notes from somebody else. And in this business, I mean, we're very ego-driven, right? It's a very alpha business to have, especially with outside sales reps and heavy competition from the nationals. But know where your place is and improve upon it. And be honest with yourself. If you're not good at something, it's okay. Celebrate what you're not. Celebrate what you're not good at. Celebrate your failures, because if you could recognize your failures, and in a way, I used to let my failures eat at me, and I loved it, because when I put my head on my pillow, they would be running through my head, and the next day when I woke up, it was a different outlook of I'm not going to have that happen again. And that first step forward is a new me towards a different way of doing things.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your acquisition today.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I love the fact that Quipli is rental agnostic. The news came down. It was a little awkward of, okay, am I on your show or not? But 100%. And, you did the Roundtable, which I thought was fantastic. And, I mean, you've really come up out of nowhere. I mean, you're the who's who in the industry, and you really have only been here for a hot minute. I've been here for 34 years, and you got a bigger microphone than me. 5 years. So kudos to you. I love what you're doing. And thanks for having this podcast, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Yeah.